Welcome to the post-cure CURED Q&A. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jessica Green. I'm the Artistic Director of the Houston Cinema Arts Festival 2020. We have such a treat today. We have two incredible individuals and like just in time to talk to us for a little bit of time, I know you guys are going to enjoy this as much as I am. I know you were as wowed by CURED as I am. It's such an incredible film. So I'm going to introduce our panelists that are joining us for this conversation, for this post-CURED Q&A. First off, we have Bennett Singer, the incredible co-director of CURED, who has been making social issue documentaries for more than 25 years. He co-directed CURED with DC-based filmmaker Patrick Salmon, and Bennett's previous co-directing credits include Electoral Dysfunction, an award-winning film on voting rights with Mo Rocca, if my memory serves me correctly, and Brother Outsider, about the one and only incredible civil rights leader and activist and queer icon Bayard Rustin, that premiered at Sundance and won more than 20 awards. He is also an associate producer on the Emmy Award PBS series Eyes on the Prize, and served for 8 years as executive editor of Time Magazine's education program. And he's also doing some pretty cool stuff these days that maybe he'll share a little bit of information with us about. So we might get into that later. Okay, otherwise, we are joined by Reverend Magora Kennedy, who has been fighting for social justice for more than 5 decades, an active participant in the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and the movement for LGBTQ equality. She is a former Black Panther who describes herself as the gayest great-great-grandmother you'll ever meet. A resident of New York City, she is a Stonewall veteran who recently completed work on a forthcoming book called Shades of Stonewall. And she is also a co-founder of the National Action Network. So, we're just, so lucky to have Reverend Kennedy with us, especially right now, and has the most incredible history and so much to share, and is doing so much, to this day, and continues to do so much incredible work. So we're gonna get these questions going. My first question is for Bennett. So can you just share a little bit about this incredible film, CURED, incredible document of a movement and a period in history, and is just so illuminating. I learned so much. I really didn't know a lot about a lot of this history. Can you just share about how this project came to be? Yes, the genesis of it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica and Reverend Kennedy, both of you, for being here today and taking some time to think about the story and the film and the lessons and the legacy. A lot of the credit for the creation of the film goes to my co-director, Patrick Salmon. It was his idea, and he reached out to me and suggested that we team up and co-direct it. I had worked on as a consultant on his last project, which is a film about Alan Turing, the gay British code breaker. And I think we both sensed that it could be a really good collaboration. And it has turned out over these 5 years to be a really inspiring kind of situation where we really do complement each other's skills. And I think we're both incredibly passionate about LGBTQ history and activism. But like you, Jessica, I don't think either of us understood this history. What happened? How did it happen? And why did it matter? And the more I, dug into the research for this pivotal moment in 1973, the more I came to understand that this was a huge turning point in terms of LGBTQ history and in terms of the way gay people think of ourselves and the way that society regards us. Until 1973, every gay person was automatically classified as mentally ill and in need of a cure. And even if people didn't seek out treatment, sometimes they did, and sometimes it was as extreme as electroshock and lobotomies and castration. But in other cases, like the consequences for someone like Reverend Kennedy, a 14-year-old young woman in Saratoga Springs whose parents, whose mother was so I think, influenced by this notion of mental illness, that, you know, she gave Magora, Reverend Kennedy, a choice, as we show in the film, you know, either go to the mental institution and try to get cured, or get married at the age of 14. And I think, you know, that kind of mindset and that kind of thinking about this problem and this sickness had so many repercussions for any LGBTQ person. And once it changed, I think, you know, the path toward equality was hugely affected, and what had seemed impossible before 1973 in terms of pursuing equal rights and first-class citizenship became so much more of a possibility. And so it was that story about what happened, how did it happen, what were the tactics, and really how did, you know, this tiny group of committed individuals bring about this transformative change.
Thank you. Reverend Kennedy, first of all, it's just an incredible honor to have you here. You are such an inspiration, and just, you know, has been on the vanguard, obviously, for so long. And I have so many questions for you that are
I just want to make a correction, though, because you said former Black Panther. Once in the Black Panther Party, always a Black Panther.
That's, you're right. And
and also I am the gayest great-great-grandmother out of the closet.
Yes.
Because I've since with this thing with since the autobiography, and then over the years, I've dealt with a lot of people that are gay, are grandparents and whatnot, but they're still in the closet.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of them said, you know, they'll come out after the kids get grown and all like that. And a lot of them also are in the Black church, you know, so it's like,
yeah.
You know, I felt like this, as I always say, I felt like the salmon swimming upstream.
Yeah. No, you are right to correct me, and we're going to make sure that that is actually corrected on this bio, because you're right. And I know from the Black Panther elders that I know that, yeah, once you're a Black Panther, you're always the Black Panther. And your point is,
and in fact, I'm gonna share. I know we're getting off kind of long off track, but I just want to share this with you. Last week, when the election results were in at 4:00 in the morning, Trump had the nerve to come on and say he won. I was so angry. I called everybody in my family and said, I'm going back into the Black Panther Party. I ain't dealing with 4 more years of this clown.
I hear you.
But I'm in a better headspace today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that clarification. And yeah, it is in fact that forthrightness and clarity that is so inspiring about you, and you know, a quality that obviously you've had in all the work that you've done, and is something that many of us struggle with, and we have so much to learn from you around that clarity and forthrightness. And like I said, I have so many questions for you, but I'm going to start with some specific questions and then maybe some broader kind of movement questions, because I think we need some of your wisdom, you know, right now. So yeah, I mean, going back to the events of CURED and your own personal story and your own life, and going back to your experiences when you were, you know, 14, and this being, you know, this choice of you can get married or you can go into a mental institution. What like legal pathway existed, if any, for your mother to say, like, you have to do this, you have to get married? Is that something that that there was a legal pathway for her to force you to get married, or how did that, you know, play out at that time? Can you just take us back and explain that a little bit?
Well, kind of knowing my mother, I mean, you'd have to know my mother like like I did. Didn't make a difference, legal or what.
Yeah.
In the state of New York, what she did was illegal. At that time, we did not know it. She signed papers in Saratoga Springs, New York, for me to get married on June 7th at 14 years of age. And that was, in fact, was a lot of us gay people upstate, that was always held over our head, because upstate New York is Utica Hospital, which is like Bellevue in New York. So that's the thing, was head over your head, that, you know, some of my Catholic girlfriends, they went to become nuns. They were not going to get married. Others, you know, succumbed to their parents like me, you know, well, my mother. Because my father was kind of like on my side, but then my father was in England, you know, he was a jockey, and he had rode for the crown. He had been in the United States, but he had not been able to ride as a jockey in the United States because of his color. So he refused to become a citizen of the United States, and the property that we had in Saratoga was taken away from us. There's no record that we ever owned, that my father ever owned property in Saratoga Springs, because he refused to become a citizen. My mother, on the other side, is Native American. And so he said he was going back to, he was going back to England. Mama said she wasn't leaving. So that was kind of like the thing, she's Native American, father's Caribbean, League of Nations. And we just went on from there. Her determination, to try to cure me, which didn't work, but anyway.
Yeah. And like, so, I mean, between that time and then the time that you did the incredibly infamous, amazing, inspiring TV appearance in 71, where you read the TV, the TV host for Filth and broke it down to him, can you just share with us, like, just that ability to know thyself and know yourself around this kind of like intersexuality, right? That everybody talks about the intersection, but your biography makes it clear that you had an understanding of this, where this intersects, where these intersections happen around queerness, around Blackness, around class, around economic, around all these areas. You had this understanding like much earlier than I think a lot of people did. And like, where did that come from? Where did that ability to know thyself and see and just like show things for what they were come from?
Well, like, I see, one of the things that happens, Native Americans call people that are of our ilk or homosexuality, they call them two-spirit. This is something that is in Native American tribes. We're considered two-spirited people. And so my grandmother, more so than my mother, I mean, she, my grandmother was the influence. My grandmother was the one that passed the stories down. My grandmother on my mother's side and my grandmother on my father's side. So I had a lot of this whole thing from the Indian side and the West Indian side, and grew up with the sense of, a lot of things like, my grandmother would say, because we are Native American, there are some Native Americans absolutely refuse to go to the reservation, which is how come my grandmother and mother wound up on the East Coast, because, they were some of the Indians that there are a lot of Native Americans that refuse to go to reservations. So, and then they also had, the tribes had what they call the tribal councils. And those people that decided not, to go to the reservation, they had that choice. So a lot of the tribes traveled, like around from East Coast to West Coast to up down, to up north, down south, and like that. So that was like how that, my grandmother and mother wound up. My mother had been married to chief of the Mohawk Indians, Chief White Cloud. And that was her first marriage. And they were the ones that discovered the springs in Saratoga. Wow. So the Mohawk Nation. So that was, that was on that side. Our side,
right.
They came from the West Indies, and Grandpa Sam, what I used to call him, acquired property in Harlem. Of course, in the building that he was in, they made fun of him of the accent, seeing Black folks with an accent and whatnot was something to be made fun of. And Grandpa took all of that and became the super of the building. And the next year, he bought the building and told everybody in the building they could stay or they had 30 days to leave. So it's that type of, I mean. So
it's ancestral. It's from an ancestral place.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's helpful, because I'm always just, I always want to understand like where this strength comes from and this clarity comes from and somebody, like you. Where it's so clear and it's so evident and it's so inspiring, and that's really,
well, one of the things is like I finally decided, Patrick has been after me to write my life story. My agent and my mentor Cecile Jackson, he's been after me to write my life story, so I'm finally gonna write my life story. Yeah,
so that's happening now. Oh, that's great. Well, so you're in the middle of writing it,
and I got to get the pen and paper together. I have to complete Shades of Stonewall. That was one thing. I mean, I've done My agent, Cecile Jackson, she's my agent, my mentor, my friend. She helped me reinvent myself and helped me publish my first book at 76 Years of Age. So the book is on Amazon. It's called This Goddess Has Landed. Does She Have a Message for You? That's on Amazon. And then the next book I wrote, because I am a goddess and because I was initiated into African Goddess Society, I wrote The Joys of Sacred Sex. Well, I put that book, it's printed, but it has not gone, it has not gone to be, I mean, I've finished it, but it has not gone to be printed. So I put that aside, just put that down, because I really was trying to do Shades of Stonewall for the 50th anniversary, which didn't happen. Because I got, well, back here you see, I have Shades of Stonewall, and 25 years ago, they presented me with a flag and a crown. And then 50 at the 50th anniversary, I got the, I got a banner. And I really was trying to put out Shades of Stonewall because I wanted to get that story told. But that, in the meantime, amongst all of that, that's during the time too that I lost my grandson, and it was just a lot of stuff, and I didn't finish. But I'm determined to finish Shades of Stonewall by time Gay Pride comes up in June.
Yeah, I mean, I hope, yeah, please. We definitely want to read it. And I want to come back to Stonewall. I want to ask you about that, but I'm going to ask Bennett a question first. Bennett, really same question, for you. I mean, I feel like Brother Outsider is also like one of the most incredible documents of a movement. This film, Cured, is one of the most incredible, documents of a social movement. There's obviously so much intersection between the two stories, the two films. Like, where does that come from? Like, what is it in your background, in your formation, that led you to do this kind of work that is both, so I would say, so expertly crafted and so beautifully made with so much utility at the same time? I think you were so good at creating beautiful films that have so much use as a tool. Like, I just think Cured, I think the world of Cured, I think the world of Reverend Kennedy, I think this is so important for young people to know this history. And yeah, like, where does that come from in your case? Like,
thank you so much for the incredibly affirming words. You're so generous. And I would first of all say both of these projects were like such team efforts. So
yes, for sure.
I was involved, but I would totally share.
But you were a through line in both of them. I mean, they're two, so
I was a through line, and I guess, and I do think at the heart of both of them is this question about, because Rustin embodies this sense too of the world was, sort of assaulting him and all gay people in the 20s and 30s and 40s with this message of being less than. And he, like Reverend Kennedy, somehow had that fortitude to say, despite what, these experts are saying, I'm not going to allow myself to be considered less than by anyone, including myself. And I think, as a kid growing up, that really touched me, because despite all of the advances that the movement had made by the time I was growing up, there was still this huge sense of stigma and silence and shame around knowing I was gay as a teenager. And really, I went through all of high school without ever mentioning it to anyone. And which I think, thinking about the way high schools have changed, that radical shift in our lifetime in the last 30 years is such a beacon of hope. But yeah, I do think that, both of these films are about, in part, LGBTQ people having that inner core of strength and self-awareness and defiance and resistance, and saying, there may be experts who claim that I'm sick or less than, but I have enough self-awareness to reject that. And I guess part of me feels like, in some small way, I went through that same process as a high school kid, or a young gay person, feeling like I never felt like I needed to change or that there was something wrong with it. But although I did understand that there was a stigma and there were reasons to keep quiet about it at first and really navigate all of those challenges. But it's fascinating, yeah, to think about how with CURED in particular, this tiny movement of people came together and supported each other and took their own inner strength and turned it into a movement.
Right. And, you know, speaking of this tiny movement of people that fought successfully to get homosexuality, you know, removed as a disorder from the essentially psychiatric handbook, right, guide. Question for both of you, and for you, I guess, to answer first, Bennett, and then we'll go to Reverend Kennedy. What is the legacy today for especially young people today fighting for LGBTQ rights today and all the ways that that manifests today of this small group of people that took on this fight and successfully won? What is that legacy? How does that connect up to what's happening today? How is it relevant to, you know, later generations that don't know about this history, don't have a memory of it? Could you talk a little bit about that, both of you, starting with Bennett?
Sure. I think there's a lot of pieces to that, but one very clear and direct connection is, you know, despite the victory in 1973, there are still ongoing attempts to cure and change LGBTQ people, both in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity. And that is a outrage in terms of human rights violations. And, you know, I think one of our main goals as we're launching this outreach work, taking the film to communities and campuses and public libraries and community centers, is really focusing on that, like what is happening with conversion therapy. And I think what CURED brings to that conversation is a sense of the history and this sense that, you know, there were these earlier efforts to cure gay people, and those efforts claim to be based on science and, you know, medical, but they were in fact based on prejudice. Yeah. And that's kind of at the heart of the film. And so there's this related theme about
and politics, right? I mean, that's
politics too.
Yeah, the intersection of science and politics here, right? Which reverberate today.
It totally,
this is something that we're dealing with. Yeah.
My other thought, like the role of science and the role of truth and the process of figuring out what the facts are, whether it's climate change or sexual orientation and what constitutes a sickness. So I do think the sense of thinking about science and our kind of collective understanding of, as a society, you know, what kind of scientific truths do we accept? And I think climate change is such a perfect example and such an urgent need for us all to agree on and then do something about. It's not just about awareness, but it is also about action.
Reverend Kennedy, could you answer that same question?
You know, oh my goodness, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But what I will say is this: that thank God for people like you know, the people that fought in the American Psychiatric. Back in the days when everybody had to be sort of closeted, there was Frank Kameny and the Mattachine Society. There was Daughters of Bilitis for the lesbian women. And, you know, it was just the idea. And then there were those of us that was considered like in the streets. And all the time, see, from a spiritual point of view, I say it was like a spiritual awakening in 1969, because like when Stonewall broke out in Greenwich Village, out in California, they were out there fighting too. And Reverend Troy D. Perry was starting Metropolitan Community Church. So it was almost like a spiritual, you know, awakening that was happening all around the country.
Speaking of Stonewall and the Panthers, you know, you'd brought up the Black Panthers before, and one thing I wanted to ask you, Iris Morales, who you may be familiar with, who's one of the founders of the Young Lords, and is, I feel like, very much a Iris Morales, who is also she's part of the Young Lords, and is a filmmaker and writer, and just somebody that seems like kind of a kindred spirit of yours, and perhaps you guys will intersect at some point. But she had said that, you know, and this was a conversation I had with her during Occupy Wall Street, you know, like a decade ago now, that this is the history of humanity, of fighting for our rights, fighting for equality, fighting for human rights.
Okay.
This is what, you know, we have done. This is what we will continue to do. We're part of a long legacy, a long history. For those of us that, you know, get weary in times like these, and look to people like you who have just stayed the course throughohout your life. How do you stay the course?
Let me stop you one minute, because this came up, and when you said something, I mean, you know, honey, please, I'm 82 years old, so if something pops in my head.
Yeah. No, please go for it. No, we want what pops out of your head. Please, we want the contents of your brain. Share them. We need them. Don't hold back.
One of the things is that in the Black Panther Party, I was in the Boston chapter of the Black Panther Party and the New Haven chapter.
Yes.
So having come from upstate New York, I was not too familiar with, you know, other chapters. I mean, we were directly connected to the California chapter because of the fact that that's where it started. Yeah. So it was almost like Boston, you know, California type thing.
Right. Sure.
Our part of the Black Panther Party. And the fact that Yale New Haven Hospital opened their doors to us, because a lot of us that was in the Black Panther Party in that part of the country were also nurses and doctors. Right. You know, so when New Haven opened their doors to us, those doctors and nurses were able to, you know, find out about sickle cell anemia. And they broke the code about sickle cell anemia. Whereas before, Black people had been being treated for pernicious anemia, which really had nothing to do. So in that context, we were sort of like in that part of, you know, the Panther Party. Yeah, and this is I think this year is the 50th of Matula Shakur's clinic in Harlem was established 50 years this year, 50 years ago. So yeah, I mean, there's an incredible history of health and wellness. And I only brought up Iris Morales, not, you know, that you would know her or anything, but just what she had said. That's what I want to know, what you think about that, this idea of, you know, that this is a continued struggle. And then how do you you've stayed in the game. Like, how do you stay the course through all of that? That's my question. I guess down through the years, the centuries, one of the things is like climate change. In the KJ, you know, King James Version of the Bible and the Catholic version of the Bible, they were saying, which goes back to where we are, homosexuality was, you know, that Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because of homosexuality. Scientifically, it was destroyed because there was, you know, there was an eruption. It was a volcanic eruption that destroyed the city. You know, the same context that happened with the story of the Jews leaving Egypt. They said that the Egyptians went to bring the slaves back to Egypt, when in fact what had happened was the slaves had stolen all of the treasure of Egypt, and they went to bring the treasure of Egypt back. And in the meantime, there was a thing of where, you know, the water separated and whatnot. It was a BCE, before the Common Era, and come to find out that they had stolen the treasure from Egypt. And all the Egyptian army was doing was wanting to bring the treasure back. And the focus on that was, and the reality of that was, that when Moses came down from the mountain with the 10 commandments, they had taken all the treasure of Egypt and made this golden calf. How could you do that, you know, if he didn't steal something? You know? And of course, you know, the biblical story, Moses was so mad he broke the 10 commandments, mad at the people for, you know, going into what they called worship idol. So you take that in the context and bring it down to today. We're going through climate change. Everything is happening. People, you know, we're still being put on as gay people right into the 21st century. So there's always going to be, the thing is where we constantly have to stay the course and fight for our rights.
So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying you find the continuity in the continuity. You find your own continuity in recognizing the continuity of your ancestors, of history, and you have to lean into that continuity to just be at grace with how you operate and move forward.
At one point I was saying, you know, the things that Barbara Getting was doing with Psychiatric Association, and they're fighting, you know, like the Salmon Oak Street. Here we are, like people like Bayard Rustin, you know, and myself, and like that, you know, we're in a Black church in the Black community, you know, and they were like laying on of hands, and you know, same thing, you know, trying to cure you. Yeah.
And what do you, if anything, if any, can you share the role of aesthetics of your style? And like you have such an incredible sense of style. Your glasses, your clothes, like your style is on point. Like what, I mean,
before there was Stonewall, I've always been a person that could sing and dance.
Yeah.
For lack of anything else. And one of the things was my mother had this big you know, idea or dream that I was going to be the next Marian Anderson, because I had this deep voice, and when I was in church I always sang in the choir, and I either sang, you know, I was either baritone or bass in the choirs. So mama just, you know, she was having this thing about I'm going to be the next Marian Anderson sort of thing, you know, along that line. Having come out of the church, like again, all I knew how to sing and do was sing and dance, and having been married at 14, my formal education went as far as the 7th grade. Other than that, I had educated myself at Scribner Library, which was Skidmore College at that time, was you know, the Ivy League college for women. So I had gone there and I had educated myself, but I also knew how to sing and dance. So I was at the Apollo Theater on the amateur hour, got my first job, you know, working in Catskill. So that has to do with, you know, how Peg Leg Bates had a country club in Catskill, New York. And I had been on the amateur hour at the Apollo Theater. My mother had to be there because, you know, underage of 18. And I had come second 2 weeks in a row to the person that was winning. So this just happened that somebody from from Peg Leg Bates's country club was in the audience that night, and I got hired. That was my first job. So the whole thing is, over the years I have sang and danced, and I love to make people laugh. I mean, I used to do this in church, you know, make people laugh. You know, so I've always been a comedian, and it's a joy to me to see people laugh, especially when things can be so sad, and you know, and the sadness and the things that we're going through. So that has to do with it, you know. I mean, I've worked secular and non-secular, you know. I've been in clubs, and I've been in churches, and I've been in theaters. Boston was the first place. There was a nightclub there called Basin Street East. It was the first time they ever had a female MC. You know, they always had male MC. It was basically a Black club. But the biggest part of my time of singing and dancing and being a comedian was in Canada. Because in Canada, I mean, you know, like I worked 6 months out of the year, you know, clubs all over Canada, where I could not work in the United States, again, because racism was so systemic. So I've been a comedian, singer, dancer, stripper, whatever it took to raise 5 kids. Okay.
And when is the memoir coming out?
The book is in the works.
I think that's a book that, yeah, I mean, my God, it's like 50 lives in one. So I'm gonna start like winding this down. I guess that dovetails into, you know, one of the last questions for you, Reverend Kennedy. Like, can you just talk a little bit about, besides the memoir, like what is next for you, what you're doing now, what you're working on, what you want to share with the audience, where they might look out for anything from you, anything you want to share about what you have going on, coming up?
Well, there's always a lot of things going on.
Yes.
Again, my book is available. The book that I have, which does not really have to do with the movement, but This Goddess Has Landed. Does She Have a Message for You? Is available on Amazon.com. Can
you repeat the title again?
This Goddess Has Landed.
Okay.
Does She Have a Message for You? If I could think, let me show you. Maybe I can show you better than I can tell you. Hopefully. You talk about your home being your castle, right? I have this one room. You know? And oh shoot, where did I put that? I was trying to, I'm talking and trying to see if I could show you the book.
Yeah, well, we can also just, you know, while you're looking, Bennett can answer this question too. I know he has a lot coming up too, so maybe Bennett.
Sure, but I mean, we were chatting earlier, I guess this morning, Reverend Kennedy, and she was talking about the meeting just last night.
Yeah.
She was part of National Action Network's youth.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that was
please
just
share.
so interesting. I
Yeah.
think people would love to hear about the work you're doing.
Yes.
Specifically with the youth.
Yes.
Focus within
thank you,
National Action
Bennett. Thank
Network.
you. Yeah, that's
It's amazing.
His organization, National Action Network, like I said, is one of the founding members, and his daughter has started a group called The Huddle, which is the young, you know, the young people, and they have their meeting every Monday night. So I'm like the grandmother of The Huddle. So they meet on Mondays, and that's Ashley Sharpton that started The Huddle, and then Dominic Sharpton, his other daughter, is in you know, in the downtown office with her father. So every Monday is The Huddle. And then last night, it was a thrill to me. One of the stars of the New York Liberties, Teresa Witherspoon, was there.
Oh, nice.
Taken with her.
That's great.
That was thrilling, you know. So every week the Huddle meets and they ask questions like the different people that are running, and politicians, you know, they're running for office. And Pete Buttigieg was there last year before they had this whole shutdown and whatnot. So, you know, this is some of the things that I'm doing. Gosh, I'll be doing so much. You know,
well, you told me also that your son is on the city council, if I'm getting this right, in Kenosha, which is another legacy that people would like to hear about.
Yeah, my son is on
Kenosha
city council in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He was president. He's past president of the city council. He was also in the Black Panther Party with me. And when the all the unrest broke out in Kenosha, he stood between the police and the people of Kenosha. Wow. You know, all of that comes from our Black Panther Party training, because when they were like, you know, I mean, he really went through it. They were calling him names, you know, from the white side and the black side. Black saying he wasn't on their side. White folks saying, you know, you're trying. And so when he called me, I told him, I said, wait a minute, you just stop right there. I said, like, you cannot let those people, you know who you are, you know what you've been through, and you know what you can do for that city. Do what you have to do and go back to your Black Panther Party training, which he did. Wound up, he had about 10 minutes with Biden when he was there.
Wow.
And after that 10 minutes with Biden, honey, the people just like flocked to him. And now he has meetings in the park where people can come and talk to him. You know, he's still with the city council. His name is Anthony Kennedy. And he's with the city council of Kenosha.
Wow, that's so incredible. What an incredible legacy. Yeah. That's your oldest son?
No, that's my baby. He doesn't let
your baby.
My baby, but that's my baby. My oldest living son, Gordon Dixon, him and Reverend Sharpton are the same age. He's in Melbourne, Australia, with the Athletic Association there. And he has dual citizenship.
Well, we can't wait until you finish this memoir, and we'll share the information about the book that you have out now. We'll follow up on that. Bennett, what's next for you? What's coming up?
Well, we just got, in terms of CURED next steps, we did just get a pretty generous grant from the American Psychiatric Association Foundation to use the film in communities and classrooms and really start conversations for medical students and LGBT activists, and focusing on the conversion therapy issue and ongoing efforts to ban conversion therapy. And one of the pieces of that I'm especially excited about is, and I think it can work even in a virtual environment, but bringing together LGBTQ elders with LGBTQ young people and having intergenerational dialogues, starting with the idea of, you know, how was life different before and after the DSM classification changed. But then I think there's so many fascinating kinds of conversations that could happen between like a 20-year-old and an 80-year-old LGBTQ person. And, you know, it's meeting Reverend Kennedy and all the people in our film has been such an amazing, eye-opening and inspiring process and standing on their shoulders and feeling like, you know, so grateful for their fearless activism, which, you know, we shouldn't forget how much was at risk and how much was at stake. Even, you know, that moment when you were on Reverend Kennedy, the Susskind show, and as a lesbian mother, I can only imagine that could have led to some problems potentially for your custody. Or, you know, with John Fryer giving that speech, his medical license could have been revoked. And so, you know, because the idea that if you're gay, you couldn't possibly be, you know, a legitimate psychiatrist because you were sick, and how could a sick person try to treat other sick people? So I do think there's a lot of...
If I can interject there, you know, like I said, I have to
please do.
One of the things that is happening to Wednesday night, I can give you the link when I get it. Wednesday night, we're having a town hall meeting. National Action Network now has an LGBTQ committee. And I've been fighting for 30 years to get that. It's finally happened. The LGBT committee, we're going into our second year.
Nice.
So we're having a town hall meeting on Wednesday, November 11th, and that is Transgender Day of Remembrance. And we're going to have a panel. You know, the chair of our LGBTQ committee is Captain Cole Napper, who is an Army captain and was medically discharged from the Army. She's also the head of National Action Network's Veterans Committee, and she's the head of National Action Network's LGBTQ committee. So she will be hosting the town hall meeting. The LGBTQ committee, she's the chair. MJ Whitehead is co-chair, and of course me, I'm the secretary and treasurer, you know, so
yeah, that's so exciting.
We're very, very proud.
Yeah,
proud of that.
That's amazing. We will share that on our socials. This is going to air after that meeting, but we're going to share it with our audience for sure. That's so incredible. And wow, it's been like such a pleasure to talk to both of you. You were both so incredible and inspiring in your own way, and doing such amazing work. And yeah, it's just been really such a pleasure to talk to you, Reverend Kennedy, and such a pleasure to talk to you, Bennett.
It's fun being 82 now.
I would, yeah, whenever I'm around you, I feel so uplifted, and so your energy is just,
I know.
Like, so,
it's like,
I forgot too.
Amazing.
Bennett, I think he's aware of this, but I got archived into the Library of Congress.
Yay!
Legend in, you know, being a gay rights pioneer. Because those of us like James Baldwin no longer with us, Bayard Rustin no longer with us, Stormy, Marsha P. Johnson, who really got the ball rolling in 1969, you know, and Sylvia Rivera, you know.
All gone, yeah, they're all gone. Reverend Kennedy, your memoir, the world is waiting. We need the memoir. Make sure you're finding time to write that. That is going to have to be my parting thought. Please write the memoir. It's going to be incredible. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Bennett. Thank you so much, Reverend Kennedy. This was such a pleasure and a joy.
Thank you, Bennett.
I thank you for including CURED in the festival, Jessica.
Thank you for letting
honored to be part of the lineup
in the festival.
It's great to be part of LGBTQ festivals, but it's also great to be part of general, you know, activist.
I say it, amen, go right there.
yeah. And shout out to Houston with its own incredible LGBTQ history and community and culture. And that's why we wanted to do this, because Houston is like, you know, super proud. And this is a amazing, you know, project for the Houston audience and for everybody, for the audience around the world. So thank you for CURED. Thank you for letting us include it. Thank you again, Bennett. Thank you again so much, Reverend Kennedy. And and thank you, audience, and goodbye. Thanks, everybody.
See you soon.
Bravo.
Bye. Bye.